We're living through this huge, uncontrolled experiment on our kids. It's happening everywhere, in their bedrooms, at the dinner table, even in their classrooms. So in this explainer, we're going to look at the really urgent case against this digital saturation of childhood and, what it's really costing all of us. It really all starts with a simple, true story. Picture this: a packed bus in London. A young man and a young woman are sitting right next to each other, and they're both scrolling through dating apps, literally looking for someone just like the person sitting inches away. They were both searching for connection, but they were so lost in their screens, they just missed it. They ended up getting off at the same stop and just walked away from each other. Total strangers. And that little, kinda sad moment on a bus? Well, it points to a much, much bigger crisis. This isn't just about one missed connection. It's about what some people are calling the great rewiring of childhood, a massive shift that's having a truly devastating impact on the mental health of an entire generation. And when you look at the data, it's stark. In the decade before 2020, which, by the way, perfectly lines up with the rise of the smartphone, the suicide rate for young teen girls just skyrocketed by 167%. For boys, it jumped by a staggering 91%. These are not just numbers on a chart. This is a plague of mental illness. The scale of this problem is just staggering. Let this number sink in. This represents the increase in self-harm among teenagers in the UK in just 9 years. A 500% increase. I mean, that is a 5-alarm fire. It's the clearest signal you could get that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong in the world our kids are growing up. So what is filling up all their time? Well, on average, kids between 8 and 18 are spending 7.5 hours a day on screens. And get this, that's outside of school. This is time that they're not spending playing outside or reading a book or just talking with their family. It's basically a childhood that's been displaced. Okay, so let's move into the classroom, because a lot of people assume that's where screen time is, productive. But we really have to ask the question, who proved that this flood of so-called ed tech is what's actually best for our children? The answer is pretty unsettling. Almost nobody has.
So this is a really crucial point. This is not an anti-technology argument. Not at all. It's an anti-dependency argument. See, digital literacy, like learning to code or use specific software, that's a skill. You can teach that. But digital dependency? That's what happens when screens just bleed into every single subject, creating what's been called neurological junk food that leaves the brain kind of flabby, twitchy, and just unable to focus.
And the evidence against this whole experiment, it is piling up. I mean, major international groups like the OECD found that more tech in the classroom has not delivered what it promised. Actually, it's often linked to worse academic results. We're seeing global test scores in math, science, and reading just plummet.
Maybe the most telling fact of all is that the actual pioneers of the digital revolution were famously careful about this stuff. Steve Jobs didn't let his own kids use iPads. And this quote? This is from Bill Gates himself. So if the architects of this digital world were worried about its effects in the classroom, shouldn't we be too?
Okay, so after hearing all that, it is really easy to feel kind of hopeless. But there is an alternative. There is a solution that isn't about going backwards, but it's about doubling down on what actually makes us human. It's a path forward that is surprisingly simple and honestly deeply encouraging.
Think about it. As AI gets more and more powerful, it makes zero sense to train our kids to compete with machines on machines' terms. Instead, schools should be backing away from all this digital stuff and focusing on the deeply human skills that AI is going to really struggle to replace. Things like empathy, deep concentration, creative expression, and just the ability to have a real, nuanced conversation.
The medium, how we get information, it truly matters. Our brains interact with things differently depending on where they come from. Screen learning, it's often passive and super distracting. It's like it's caffeinating and numbing you at the same time. But book learning, that's an active, focused, and almost decompressing process. We just absorb information more profoundly from a physical page than we do from a glowing screen. So the solution is clear, it's proven, and it's powerful. Real books, writing by hand, which actually installs information into the brain way more effectively than typing, and most importantly, an excellent human teacher at the front of the room. You know why these methods work? Because they involve healthy friction. Learning requires a little bit of struggle. Making everything easy and frictionless is kind of like feeding a 10-year-old puree when they need to learn how to chew. So let's end this by just flipping the whole argument on its head. For years, concerned parents and teachers, they've been asked to prove the harms of screen use. But that's completely backwards. The burden of proof should be on the multi-billion-dollar companies pushing these devices into our schools. Before we continue this massive experiment, we should all be asking one simple question: where is the evidence that any of this is safe?